Today, we are talking about how to revolutionize your content quality by mastering information gain at scale. And hi, I'm me. So I'm Amanda Johnson. I am the person who sent you this email and other emails for webinar invites. I'm a real person and not AI. I am the senior marketing manager at Clearscope and joined the team back in January of this year. But I have been a huge Clearscope fan since I've been using it, I think since about 2019 in my own content strategy and production work. So I was using it before I came on the team. And in addition to working at Clearscope, I am the proud parent of one human son and two hilarious cats. As you see them here, they're super adorable, but I am biased. I also love to garden. So you'll get some gardening examples today thrown into the session. And I had to throw in this beautiful vase of flowers because why not? I love those baby plants. Okay. I've been working in content marketing in some way, shape, or form for about 10 years now. But if you count the years at the start of my career, I've been in educational content of some form for about 15 years. In the last 6 to 7, I've dug into SEO and I truly love it. It's a nice blend of all my professional interests and skills. And as I like to say, it's like playing a video game against Google, and who doesn't love doing that, right? Before I worked for Clearscope, I was doing in-house and contract work for personal finance websites like fintech, climate tech startups, even mental health content space for a while. And my favorite kind of content and SEO strategy is complicated topics. So I love and believe in education as marketing. I love like the your money, your life sectors. That's a fun challenge as always. Okay. So here's what we're here for today. We're going to talk about what information gain is, why incorporating it throughout your content matters, and how to do that with like a step-by-step plan that I'll walk you through. How to find it and organize it. Many of us already have tons of this on hand that we're not using to its fullest potential. Also how to select your content pieces for your test and incorporate this data into your content at scale and monitor your tests, and how to incorporate it into production long-term. So here today, I'm going to expand on the work that Bernard and others before me have already done on this topic and show you how to implement it at scale. And this session is especially great for people who've inherited an older content of consensus or an older library of consensus content that needs reworked or refreshed, or those of you joining who have a lot of content that need to be refreshed. And isn't that all of us? That's like always a task that's on the back burner. Or those of you who've heard about Bernard's like ranch style, perspective driven SEO approach or information gain, and you want to try it out yourself in your new and old content. What I won't be covering today, just FYI, is the August 2024 Google Core update. It's too new. Just got back from vacation myself, and there are so many people out there that can touch on it better than I can. But in September, we are having an AMA style panel. So if you're interested in that topic, make sure to be on the lookout for that. And I'm sure we're going to discuss it there. Something else you'll get from me today, GIFs and or GIFs, however you pronounce it. I'm a big GIF user. I will not apologize for it. It's going to be fun. Okay, so first up, what is information gain and why is it important? Is this just another SEO buzzword? That's always the question, right? There are so many buzz phrases in the marketing world, and it's easy to be skeptical of, yeah, another idea that sounds like another buzzword. I became aware of the concept of information gain in the last like 12 months or so, but when I dug into what it actually was, I realized that I had been practicing the concept for some time. And so when we dig into this today, you might have a light bulb moment and you're like, oh my gosh, I've been doing this too. I just haven't been calling it information gain. So I recognized that content pieces or strategy that I was implementing was always more successful when taking this approach, even for sites that had little to no domain authority or backlinks. And I couldn't exactly at the time explain to my clients why it was working for Google or why it was working so quickly, because it was working quickly. I just kept labeling it as like good, high quality, people first content because that's what it is. But let's dig in a bit further. So this is how we define information gain at Clearscope. This is Bernard's definition here. It's content that covers concepts and entities on the fringe of Google's knowledge graph for the topic. So what does that mean? I'm not going to do a big deep dive into it today, but I'm just going to talk about it, quick overview, so we're on the same page. Essentially, information gain is content that includes like new data, new information, or perspectives on a certain topic that is entity rich or provides like a full coverage of that particular idea or query through a newer lens. And more on that in a bit. I do want to discuss the idea of an information gain score, and that was outlined in one of Google's patents. So there's a lot we don't know about information gain and its impact on rankings, but we do know it's important to Google and that it can work for us in our favor. So within a patent filed by Google in 2018, there are two specific pieces of language that I want to call out here that are important for SEOs and content marketers. So first up is this piece of language here. It outlines that an information gain score indicates additional information that's included in the document, or what I would guess is like the web page or piece of content that's been indexed, that is beyond information that the user has already seen. I'm not a patent attorney. I'm not a legal professional. I've never worked for Google, but this is how I read this. And so that's the first piece of language I want to call out that's important for us. Here's the second piece, and I'll tell you why I think these matter big time. So this second piece here, the info gain score seems to be determined by examining documents across a machine learning model to generate that information gain score. And I kind of understand or interpret this to possibly mean looking at documents indexed across the topic as like on the whole and determining what documents or web pages or content provide new information to that existing discussion. Again, not an attorney, take what I'm taking with a grain of salt, or my interpretation with a grain of salt. But here's why I think these pieces of the patent matter to the work that we do as SEOs and content marketers. So, two reasons. First, we need to think about information gain across a user's search journey and use of a search engine. So basically, when you're thinking like a sales funnel, user search journey, buyer's journey, whatever you want to call it, we have to think about incorporating information gain along the way. And two, we need to think about incorporating information gain across the body of our targeted topic and in our individual content pieces. So let's say I'm a garden bed manufacturing business. I love talking about gardens, so I had to throw this in here. That writes about raised bed gardening tips, organic gardening methods, and I need to be proving or providing new and fresh data and fresh perspectives and insights, and even first person's accounts across the education that I'm providing to my audience, right? Here's a story for you illustrating this concept. Really happened. It's my own search journey. The story of creeping phlox, which is a weird name, but it's a beautiful plant. So we're going to dig into gardening examples again. If you were here last month for Rand Fishkin's session, he used risotto recipes. So if you like to cook instead of garden, I highly recommend that session. And overall, it's a good session anyway to watch. But this is creeping phlox, and it's absolutely beautiful if you ask me. This past spring, I was looking to plant some in my flower beds around my house. So of course, I did some Googling to first learn when to plant it in my growing zone and if it would work well in part sun to part shade. And I'm about to show you like what Google served me with that initial search for the short tail keyword creeping phlox, right? So it provided me the results that you'd expect, like where to buy, what it is, where to plant it, showed me photos. Now I'm recreating this search from a year or earlier this year in spring. And I was using my phone when I was searching, and I was using the Google app, which was logged into with my personal account. After receiving these initial results, I started receiving the following types of articles in Google Discover, along with any additional phlox related searches that I did after this first short tail keyword search. So I was being served up content like 7 things you didn't know about creeping flocks. So like new perspectives on the plant. And then also things like great companion plants for creeping flocks. At this point, Google and all the rest of the apps on my phone understood I was making decisions about what to plant in my garden beds. So it was offering me new information that was related to that journey. And then also, oh, that's spelled incorrectly, but beet weeds when perennial ground covers. Let's just take it as like a gardening pun there. But so I was also served up other gardening ideas for ground covered plants. So why in the world does this example matter, especially when talking about those 2 pieces of the patent to think through? So my original search was creeping phlox, weird plant name, beautiful plant, but the resulting content served up post the original search was like phlox for sale, what I needed to know about phlox, why it's, the best plant for weed cover or whatever. Google was building on my overall user journey, and I'm sure you've noticed this with your own search results. And it's exactly why we have that rule of thumb to check search results via like an incognito or private window when doing SERP research. But in addition to thinking through incorporating information gain on individual pages or articles across our site, we just also need to think through how we're building content journeys with a variety of perspectives that provide information gain across the topic of the user's journey. So that just is going back to those 2 parts of the patent that I discussed earlier. Okay, here's why you should incorporate information gain in all of your content. So let's talk about why information gain is so essential and a healthy practice to SEO today. I love this quote from Garrett Sussman over at iPullRank. So the important consideration is that information gain is part of your framework for content creation as a whole, leveraging experts, spin your topic with a modern take, or surface first-party interesting data, and your audience in Google will notice. And we'll talk about how to do this later in the presentation, but first, let's talk about these reasons you want to incorporate it. Adding information gain to your old, existing, and new content you have planned can set it apart from lower quality and AI-generated content and search results. Everyone here has seen this, right? Many topics have a high amount of SERP similarity, or what we like to call consensus content. It's pretty generic, and those content pieces all provide essentially the same answer to the same query, and everyone's fighting for that top spot in the results. Let's look at this example here. The search phrase is, what is SEO? When we see a high confidence in consensus, it produces that SERP similarity, so like search engine result page similarity, which is also more likely to produce AI overviews, featured snippets, and not encourage users to visit our site that we worked really hard on. So for queries like this one, there's a ton of consensus and there's a lot of generic content. That's not a great experience, but you, yes, you can beat the SERP similarity with relevant information gain and entity-rich content that matches the fringes of Google's knowledge graph. And that's a mouthful, but I promise I'm going to break this all down later. So reason number 2, offering new, fresh takes on primary sources and first-party data is just simply good content creation and journalism, no matter where people find your content. Nobody likes boring. Boring is for robots. It doesn't offer anything new. Stanley from The Office doesn't like it. No one, right? Okay. So when we're incorporating like insights from our own customers, polls, data, new fresh perspectives on existing topics, or research that other organizations have done, we're creating interesting content. That's what people want to read. Okay, and reason number 3, incorporating information gain by writing about fringe topics and content targeting zero volume searches can help you build topical authority. You hear a lot of experts talking about topical authority, and it's not the same thing as domain authority. I'm not going to dig into it in this session, But it's often, when a lot of us hear that phrase, we're often wondering, like, how do you build it? It feels kind of elusive, especially if you've got a new site that's just starting with SEO and content marketing. Targeting those zero volume searches can help you do that, whether you're a brand new site or you're an older site attempting to like rework your strategy or climb the search results for something new. Okay, so before we move to the next section, just high level, here's how to incorporate information gain in your content. So you're going to develop entity-rich content. We'll talk about that. Demonstrate experience, provide expertise, and show authority. And if you're like, man, Amanda, we have heard all of this before. This is like EEAT. Yes. Yes. 3 of those things in the slide are kind of centering on those guidelines. And we'll talk about how to implement this at scale, because it's a lot of work to produce this across an entire library of content. So first, developing entity-rich content that sharply meets the search intent of your query. What does that mean? So tools like Clearscope make this easy because the Clearscope reporting feature can help guide you. Yes, I do work for Clearscope, but I think it's worth mentioning. But it's essential in order to sharply meet search intent for a query. So like in this simple example of like, what is a content brief? The Clearscope report will help you include the entities that search engines recognize as valuable to the users in the content that answers that query, like sharply based on search intent. So a quick note on entities for those here who are like, wait, what? An entity is essentially a real world object or concept that can be named. So by providing entity-rich content and fresh new data and firsthand experience, you're signaling to search engines and LLMs your content is valuable and comprehensive. And entity-rich content is not based on word count. You can have entity-rich content that is short and sweet. I feel like this is really important to mention here. In years past, myself included, SEO practitioners kind of held the belief that the longer and the more comprehensive a piece of content was, the more likely it was to rank. Think like, like skyscraper tactics and big giant pillar articles. But what we're finding and what we know is that it's not the word count that's valuable, it's the entity-rich content. You can have 1,000 or an 800-word blog post that's entity-rich, and we've been running some tests on our own content at Clearscope that validates this, and hope we can show you more of that over time once we have more data collected. Okay, you can also prioritize information gain in your content by demonstrating experience, which of course directly aligns with like EEAT guidance. An example of this includes adding things like real stories and fresh perspectives on old topics. So like to get meta here, this is our article on information gain and how we incorporated information gain in that article with like real success stories, which I'll actually talk about this success story here in a bit. Also, you can do this by incorporating, sorry, I'm skipping around on my slides. New information, expert interviews, fresh data. I love this example also in our information gain article with Tom Shapiro over at StrataBeat. He did a huge study about what was working across 250 B2B websites. And we incorporated some of that data into our own article about information gain, and of course linked out to it. And you should check out the study and his webinar on it. It's really good. But that kind of signals, again, experience, fresh data to Google's. But not only that, this is just helpful information for readers, right? Like, and lastly, you can prioritize information gain in your content by showing authority. So by taking on new topics that your audience cares about, even if they're zero volume search queries. So in this particular article here on the Clearscope blog, I addressed a question that's organic in our community. However, it didn't have any estimated search volume behind it. But guess what? That doesn't mean it has zero traffic. It's demonstrating authority because we're educating our audience on things they actually care about, whether or not SEO tools out there demonstrate any search volume behind the topic. Okay, so we're going to stop here for another story, which I like to call the low volume seasonal pain point search that built a successful authoritative site. So the title needs some work. Yes, I would love suggestions. But here I'm going to share the story. I've anonymized and generalized the data for privacy purposes because it is a past client of mine. So I had a client that wanted to test content marketing and SEO as a channel. At the time, the site was not investing in any holistic content SEO and had very few blog resources and infrequent publishing. Maybe they had about, I want to say like maybe 20, definitely under 30 or 40 poorly executed blog articles. And this is just a little screenshot here showing their like very quick journey to their goals before they pivoted their business model. But the site in question was earning about 300 to 600 organic clicks per month, if that. And it was mainly due to their excellent PR team. They had no backlink strategy, no regular content creation routine, no UX efforts across the site, like literally nothing. They decided to create what I'll call like a new seasonal take article on a topic they wanted to rank for. And here's where the story really gets interesting. And this cat gif is for your viewing pleasure while I tell you the story. But no one was writing about this new seasonal take in this space, but their target consumers were experiencing a highly specific seasonal pain point and topic of curiosity that literally no one was tackling well. And it was one of the top questions that their sales team was receiving, but there was no real search volume behind it. In fact, the only reason they decided to take it on was they wanted a resource for their sales team to give leads, and because the internal team of experts knew enough in order to properly answer the question. They'd had a deep understanding of the product and their target audience. So my colleague and work partner who was working on the project with me created a piece that addressed this concern. And again, I'm referring to it as like the new seasonal take article. And it was very seasonal specific. Think like actual like seasons of the year. After publishing that article, that was bursting with information gain, because not only had competitors not really addressed this need thoroughly before, but like we also included expert insight. It was kind of like brand new to talk about it. And within like 3 to max 6 months, I want to say even less than that, they had earned their first featured snippet for the topic of that article. But the kicker is like they weren't doing anything else. This was like an article they created for their sales team. And this helped build the internal team build a case to like invest further in SEO. So after I implemented a holistic content-led SEO strategy for this team, it started the snowball of topical authority and growth for their site. Yes, copycat content, cats, soon appeared, but the site held strong for the original take. And within 12 to 18 months of publishing that article, again, that had like zero search volume behind its concerns, the site was earning almost 6-figure organic clicks a month in peak season on blog content alone. I am not even kidding you. Like, we were blown away and so excited. But do you know what the most consistent top performing page was? The new seasonal take article that like snowballed the entire topical authority for the topics they were writing about. So that little tiny article that started it all and was projected to have no monthly search volume by SEO tools, that was driving people in like crazy. So the business has since changed its business model and eliminated the need for SEO, which is very sad. But to this day, about 142 of these top 3 queries this site still ranks for are commercial and transactional and have an estimated of like 18,000 monthly searches a month. And out of those, they are still holding, without doing any more work, 94 position 1 rankings that are in the topic of that initial 0 search volume article. So over time, the pages that were consistently bringing in the majority of their traffic and leads were directly related to that new seasonal take topic. And it all started with publishing a content piece directly rooted in information gain, even though I didn't know what to call that at the time, right? And I'm going to show you how you can do this. Like this will start, for many, this will start that topical authority snowball. And it's still successful for this site today, despite Google updates and everything. So I'm going to mention a few other resources during the session, but don't worry, I'll provide them all to you afterwards in the email. Okay, so let's talk about how to do this and how you can implement it. Phase 1, you're going to organize your existing first-party data. So basically all the information that adds value gain or valuable information gain that you already have on hand. And yes, it is likely you already have some of this on hand without having to spend a dime, which is what's so cool. And I'll show you where to find it. So before we dig in though, I want to get some important definitions out of the way because we're all on the same page, because I know there's just like a lot of buzzwords and a lot of different terms and how we use them across marketing, right? So I'm going to talk through these 4 definitions: perspective-driven content, first-party data, primary sources, and secondary sources. And I will move through them pretty quickly here, but I'll mention them quite a bit the rest of this session. Some of them, or all of them actually, can be considered like fresh information and data, but they all mean something a little different. So first up, perspective-driven content. So this kind of content goes beyond simply presenting information and provides a fresh, original take that resonates with your target audience. Bernard's ranch style SEO frameworks expand quite a bit on this topic, and I'll provide you with that resource with the recording. So next definition, first-party data. It's information that a company collects directly from its audience. Examples include like case studies, like this before and after kitchen update via social media posts, the IBM client case study on the Clearscope website, or even this customer success story about home electrification from Elephant Energy, a site called Elephant Energy. Okay, and then customer testimonials are part of this group too. So whether those are found organically on social media like YouTube and TikTok, or if they're collected via emails and phone calls and used across your site, like this one for a construction company. So you can also collect first-party data from product reviews. So whether that's discussions on Reddit, I love a Brooks glycerin running shoe, by the way. They're not paying me to say that, but they're great. Or Amazon reviews, that kind of thing. And then also customer surveys, even really old ones that you've done. If you've completed customer surveys or polls in the past, that's existing information gain that you have on your hands and can incorporate into existing or new content. Okay. Next definition, primary sources. It's firsthand data that hasn't been previously published or analyzed or reported on outside of its original source. So examples are like scientific analyses, things from like professional associations like the National Association of Realtors or Superpath and their content marketing salary report. So regular reoccurring studies. Basically, when you're citing a primary source in your content, you're going to want to provide a unique analysis or report a fresh perspective of that data. That way you're kind of offering that like information gain or whatever to your audience. I know information gain is not like just like something you just like slap in a document or a piece of content. And we'll talk about that a bit more, but you're going to want to just like provide context and perspective to the conversation or to the statistics you're using, right? If you're recirculating information from secondary sources, so that's like a different source that's providing an analysis of a primary source, it's less likely to provide like new coverage, like if you're citing those in your content. So your goal is to be the content people link to for clear, plain language, unique perspective of primary sources. Essentially, you want to be the go-to secondary source, right? When adding like fresh perspectives to the conversation. Okay, so we're going to go through a quick example here. Let's pretend I'm internet giant Home Advisor and I release an annual analysis of the data from the National Realtors Association. So this analysis I want to write is geared specifically towards homeowners. I want it to be easy to read and give fresh information and perspective to my target audience of homeowners. So I write it up. And let's say in this example, the world loves my analysis of the original data so much that Forbes is starting to cite my analysis, which is considered a secondary source of that primary realtor study in their article. And that's what you want your content to be. You want to provide information gain and add to the conversation, even if you're using existing data from other areas in your industry that you didn't create. And you want it to be so good and fresh that other sites want to backlink to your analysis, right? Okay. So this is another example. I'm not going to dig in. You can look at the slide deck just for the sake of time, but another example of what this could look like with two sources here. So now that we've got definitions out of the way, it's time to audit your first party data and primary sources. Be audit you can be. Love a good pun. So you're going to audit all of your site, public reviews, past marketing materials to collect all this information in one place. So here's where you're going to want to look. I'm not going to read through this entire list, but these are some great examples if you want to take a peek of like where to look for this already existing information that you can gather in order to weave it into your content. And you're going to do what you do best, and you are going to surf the web for your brand all over the internet and collect what already exists. So go surfing. Okay. Next, you're going to organize the heck out of it. This is my favorite part, but you're going to take time to compile and organize all of this information, which makes it easier to copy and paste into your drafted content, distribute across your marketing channels, like so other channels outside of content marketing, and use in socials and emails and ads. You can share this like document with freelancers or your team leaders for ready to go crafted copy. And trust me when I say, like your broader marketing team or clients are going to love you for providing something like this. And what I like to call this document is my information gain swipe file. Okay. So because I care about you and I want to make this super easy, and because I love organizing, I've created a template you can make a copy of and use to start storing all this information in one place. Bernard will drop the link into the chat, but if you miss it, it's okay. I'll provide it in the follow-up email. Okay. So here's an example of what this can look like. I'm not going to read through all this again for the sake of time, but I like to record the original stat and copy directly from the source. The original source URL, I like to download or screenshot the original source and then save it as a Google Drive link that I also link in. And trust me, you are going to want to save these somewhere in a central place, especially if they're external sources, because as we all know, sometimes these pages retire and disappear. And so keeping it on hand helps any future teammates or any future use when you need to prove like, actually, we did get this data from somewhere. It actually really existed. And you're going to want to do the same thing for internal data too. And you can create a quick citation. I like to use like ChatGPT to like help me create a quick citation that you can use in your article or even a shortened note to use on the bottom of like social posts or whatever. And then storing all this info in one place, including the citations, will allow you and any people that you're working with on content to easily integrate this information directly into your content when doing refreshes or creating briefs for new content, all of that. My favorite thing about this is like handing this to freelancers or team members that you work with, because you already have like branded and approved sources. So like you can create branded snippets of this other outside external data that sounds like your brand, and they can easily weave it into what they're working on. Again, this example is an external source, but you'll also want to do this work for internal data like customer testimonials or emails or case studies that you've done, all of that. Okay. I also would not be a good friend or a good Clearscope teammate if I didn't show you that you can use Clearscope to find some of this stuff quickly. So if you if you go to your Clearscope reports, you can get ideas for citations and studies that your competitors are already using or that search engines might expect to see in authoritative content. So you open a Clearscope report, you can access, like navigate to the research tab, scroll down and view the citations, and that will give you some ideas, like starting points, jumping off points to see like, oh, okay, like maybe Google expects to see these kind of citations, or maybe humans expect to see this kind of, you know, these kind of studies in order to prove authority. Okay, so now that we've gathered all that stuff and organized it into your handy dandy InfoGain swipe file, we're going to move on to phase 2. This is going to be a little bit longer, and I realize we have like 20 minutes left, so I'm going to try to be quick. If I skip some slides, or if we don't get to your questions, I promise we will get to the questions in an email. So when you're going to test incorporating information gain in your content production, I'm going to walk you through how to select your test pieces, incorporate the changes, and monitor your tests. But it's important to note, if you're already bought in to like the idea of including information gain, and I hope that you are, and if you don't need to like prove out this work to other stakeholders, you can just skip this test altogether and just start doing it. But if you need evidence of its value in order to like get more resources invested in this kind of thing and collecting and creating new information, this is a good next step. So here, whoops, I skipped ahead. I went backwards. Hold on, y'all. There we go. Okay. There we go. Here are a few best practices to keep in mind for selecting your test content. Okay, you're going to want to choose like older decaying content that already needs a refresh. Like, why do double work, right? If you're going to test something, go ahead and get something that needs to be refreshed. I like to work in topic clusters. So I actually like to do a test in topic clusters, and I'll explain why in a second. And then also, I feel like, does this even need to be said? But I'm going to say it. Avoid your highest visited and highest lead generating pages unless you already know that they need rework and they're in decline. So about working in topic clusters. I like to work in topic clusters to monitor a test impact on a topic as a whole, because I truly believe in the validity of topical authority, and many of these pages in a topic cluster support one another's success and are usually already internally linked together, or at least like should be. Okay, so for those who are Clearscope users, I'm going to breeze through this really quick because not everyone is a Clearscope user on this call, but here's how you can use the tool to find good pieces for running content tests. But if you're not a Clearscope user, you can do this without the tool. Just use Google Search Console. It will be a little bit more manual and take you some more time. But in Clearscope, you just navigate to the content decay, like over on the left sidebar. And that report will show you pages within your inventory that have experienced a decline or like need refresh. So if you're using Google Search Console, you're just going to look for pages that have like an obvious decline, their click-through rates or like their positioning, that kind of thing. You can also, this is my favorite. I'm very excited to talk about this with you. But if you are a user, a Clearscope user, you can also do this in Clearscope content views. This is a new feature and one of my personal faves. Our team loves it. Basically, you can organize and group your content into different buckets within your inventory so you can see the performance of those groups all at once, and way easier than GA4, in my opinion, way easier. So since I like to work with topic clusters when I do tests, and I've organized my inventory by, I'm looking over here because that's where my slide is, but like organizing my inventory by topics, I will like look at those individually and see which topic as a whole needs a good refresh. There's also a new best opportunities view that guides you to pages that would be a good opportunity for touch up. So that's also very cool, right? Okay. So essential metrics to track for your test. Let's talk about this. These are my favorites to keep an eye on. I like to track Google Search Console monthly organic traffic and impressions, the number of like total ranking keywords for the URL, and then the number of page one average positions or placements. And I personally like to break my page one placements down into like top 3, top 5, and just like top 10 as a whole to monitor like how those are changing over time. Excuse me. And then also you're going to want to track like your like monthly MQLs per page or form opt-ins, whatever is your like organic search success metric that you want to track, right? I also like to track on-page engagement signals from GA4. So like the time on the page or like any other engagement actions that you might have set up that are important to you. And then I also just like to make a note before a refresh and after refresh, like where the hot spots or sweet spots on the page are. You can use a heat map tool like Hotjar and try to preserve these areas in your content if they're already working well and optimize around those areas for CTA placements. And again, if you're using Clearscope, you can record like your content grade pre-refresh and after refresh or test. Okay, so also, because I love organizing stuff, I've created a template for you to record these metrics and KPIs and track them over time. This template is set up to where there's an example, but then you can track individual pages, and then you can also track by topic clusters. And you can make a topic of this, or a topic, what am I saying? Topics. You can make a copy of this and adapt it for your needs. So I provided one example in the template along with a tab to record the metrics. So, and you can also record these in page annotations. If you're a Clearscope user, we also really like doing this with our refreshes, which is pretty cool. Okay, so how do you refresh and rework information gain into your test content? Okay, get your tools out. Here we go. I want to show you a few examples of how to refresh it and weave it into your existing content naturally and organically. So now is the time to like start incorporating all that information that you gathered into your content test. You're going to weave in all this good stuff from your info gain slide file into your test content, and you'll work in like customer testimonials into the narrative, like pieces of older case studies reframed in a new narrative, statistics and studies, like true firsthand stories, like real ones, right? Stories of experiences that fit with the article. Here's an example of this that I did for another site where we wove in true stories from people on our team about what they were experiencing in their homes. And it was directly for SEO, like it was content created for SEO purposes. It wasn't like a customer testimonial or anything like that. And then we wove it into the content that was going after specific search queries that we were targeting. And you will also get these slides. So if I'm moving quickly because of time, you'll get them. Okay, and then also in this stage of your test, you'll need to refresh and rework older content as needed. So like refresh according to like current events, current user intent, new first party data you've collected, like fresh updated statistics, and of course, any current content and SEO best practices. So you'll need to make sure as you're refreshing that your content is entity rich and meets the targeted search query. And I'm going to give you an example. So we love bone broth. We love bone broth at Clearscope. And if you know our team, we use this example all the time. So let's do it. Let's say you've got a full guide in a size, like a skyscraper style article. It's really big. It's everything you need to know about bone broth, but it's been in decline as a piece of content. And you want to rework it with like information gain in mind, because right now it's pretty generic. AI could spit it out for you tomorrow, right? Or today even. So you might split this larger, more generic article out into like 3 shorter like articles with sharper search intent. So for example, everything about bone broth we learned from grandma, and you can add your grandma's own recipe along with like customer reviews or the best store-bought kinds that taste homemade, like comparison tables. or even like splitting out an article into like top benefits of drinking bone broth, maybe with a 20-day experiment. And maybe you also include like a research study from a medical professional about the healing properties of bone broth, and even how to incorporate bone broth into intermittent fasting with like a step-by-step and an interview with like a certified nutritionist. So not only are you transforming this older generic piece of content that's in decline into like sharper search intents with like sharper perspective, but you're also including like information, right? New information, like an interview, a story from your grandma, or like an interview with a doctor or something. If you're a content person and you're like, this is intuitive to me, this is just good content, right? Yes. But we have to remember like that original like consensus content piece about bone broth didn't include those firsthand experiences, interviews, or data. It was like generic education. And that's what a lot of us are still doing across the web. So while reworking your articles, you're also going to want to make sure your content is comprehensive and entity rich. And remember, that doesn't mean you have to have a high word count, right? Okay. And then also a part of this phase in your test, I'm going to go quickly just to make sure we have a couple time for questions, hopefully. You're going to want to make sure to work in zero volume keyword content. So in the world of information gain, going after these keywords, these types of keywords makes absolute sense, right? And that is evidenced by that example I shared earlier, which that got the snowball of topical authority rolling. But many times zero volume keywords are just on the horizon of interest. And by targeting those keywords early on, you can establish a presence before your competition intensifies. A good example here is like, are there SEO issues when transferring a domain name and it has zero estimated search volume in a traditional keyword research tool like SEMrush? But the top ranking page for this particular query ranks for a lot of related keywords. And the estimated total monthly search volume for the top three, like keywords in the top three placements, like alone for this piece of content is like $6.90 per month. So this part of your test, you're going to want to think through what related zero volume search keywords can you incorporate, choose 2 to 3 to create new content around. You can also find areas of content improvement with Clearscope. I have like an appendix in the slide deck that you can look at, but basically that's what the tool is doing when it's guiding you in your terms and including entities. We have a concept that our internal team calls Clearscope A+++ content. And it's when you include any additionally suggested tools or terms into the tool. And then that way the report logs that for you. So how to monitor and record your results. Finally, the last part of phase 2, I like to set reminders in my project management software to observe results after 1 week, 1 month, 3 months, and 6 months after doing that initial like rework test and publishing that refresh. And at your time checkups, of course, record the same metrics in your spreadsheet and refresh and tweak content as needed to continue to see those top rankings. If you refreshed and it kind of like got a little wonky and you're like, wait a second, I feel like I need to do a little more work there. Okay, so phase 3, I'll run through this very quickly. Take action on what you learned from your content test. So after determining, like just keeping an eye on what types of information gain are working well for your content, take action to create, I mean, this is pretty self-explanatory, but create ways to keep capturing that data, like from customers, like even if it's just like a place to gather emails or regular opportunities for customer feedback or product reviews. And then you can also plan time for ongoing information and data creation on like with the information that your target audience likes to see. So like interviewing outside experts or running tests and surveys. And you can do 1 2-hour interview and you could use it in 15 pieces of content. Like you can really maximize your efforts and resources here. And then store it all in your information gain swipe file and incorporate it in your content long term. So all that good stuff you're investing in, keep organizing it in that swipe file, and then you can just update as you update pieces or infuse it into new content, and it's gold, y'all. That's how you're going to win the internet, right? And set your content apart from AI generated content at least. And it's just a smart content practice. I love this quote about info gain from Tori Gray. I'm not going to read through it for the sake of time, but it's here for you if you want to read it. And then a couple of recaps before I wrap up and we go to questions. So information gain is not just another buzzword, right? It's about creating healthy, interesting content that's unique to your audience and your brand and your customers, not just like, spitting out consensus content with push button AI content tools. And remember those two things to keep in mind from the Google patent. Again, this is my interpretation as a non-legal professional or Google person, but we need to think about information gain across a search journey as a whole and within individual pieces of content. Just throwing in like citations is not going to help. It's about creating interesting and entity-rich content that incorporates new information that AI content generators cannot create. Content that is helpful and interesting to people first and foremost, and then signals, those EEAT things and entity stuff to Google second, right? And then you're going to want to focus on making it fresh, entity-rich, and interesting. So, oh wait. Y'all, I'm getting lost. How about we just go to questions? It takes a lot of effort to incorporate it at scale, but it's worthwhile. And you can do it, especially when you have like a process to organize it and incorporate it long term. Creating that systemized process is really key to like streamlining the amount of work that is involved in this, especially across an older, inherited, existing content library. Okay, so Bernard, I'm done.
That that was like an encyclopedia of good stuff.
It was so much, right?
It was great. It was
I
great.
feel like we needed to do like three sessions.
I've been sharing all the resources and all the swipe files as you've been going along, and overall, I feel like everyone's just been gobbling it up. We only have 5 more minutes for questions, so I'm gonna jump into the things that I spotted in the chat and in the Q&A. Number one, I know you touched a bit about this, but Abdullah asks, maybe perhaps a better question. He says, does AI help in writing SEO articles? Perhaps the better question here is like, what are the do's and don'ts when it comes to using AI to help with writing SEO?
Yeah, that's a good question. And we do have a really wonderful resource on the Clearscope blog about like AI assisted content versus AI generated content. So I like to use AI in like building outlines or like filling in like generic information, but obviously like doing that in a branded way that kind of gives a house for like the real story to live in or like the real data that I would like to share with people. So does that kind of answer that question?
Yeah, totally. Then moving on, Victoria asks, for freelance content writers, how can one work with a marketing director or content team to better incorporate information gain into a company's content? In other words, how to pitch the value of this, even if it takes a bit more time and resources.
Yeah, I have been there. I have been there. And that is like it's like kind of painful because you're like, I know what work needs to be done and how can I get someone to like invest in that work? Well, I don't want to keep just saying like Clearscope has resources, but you could send them this webinar, right? Or some of our articles. There is one about like why it's important to think about this now and how this is going to set apart your content library. Or I mean, it's kind of like, I don't know if I would say this because you are a freelancer, you're being paid by project or by your hourly time. But like if you start doing this and modeling it, like storing like information you're using and the content you're producing, and then like give that to that team and be like, this should be really incorporated across, like this is a practice that you should be doing across your content. That could be one way to go about it, although it is a little bit extra work. But I always liked educating my clients and with a maybe like a set of resources like that weren't from me, that were like, blogs out in the world or webinars, or like Tom Shapiro has that really great webinar that he did where he did a study of 250 websites. And a lot of it kind of proved out some of these theories too. Like companies that were including new data in their content that they were producing saw like a notable increase. So I highly recommend that one as well.
Awesome. Well, we're right about at the hour, and you know how I like to always end it. So I will end it with the question is, what looking forward, SEO obviously has changed quite a bit in the last year to two. What's the one piece of advice that you want to leave everybody here with in terms of SEO content moving forward?
That's a really good question. And I'm a very verbose person. So I'm gonna try to just keep it, as you know, firsthand, Bernard. I'm gonna try to keep it like short. Um, People first. I feel like we hear that a lot and it's like, what does that really mean? But like write to a person, like create education for people. Use tools like Clearscope afterward, like as a subject matter expert, like use that afterward to make sure search engines find it. But like at the end of the day, we should be concentrating on the readers, on our audience. But also like the idea of like how much is changing in search. um I feel like creating good content with SEO in mind, but maybe with this like people first approach and information gain approach, like no matter where your content is found, it will be more interesting. Like whether that's in emails or like social media or whatever, thinking through like how can I make the best content possible in order to serve people wherever they encounter it.
I love it. People first. And I've seen it firsthand from, a lot of the content you've created. People want to read things that are relatable, engaging, and like, written for them. So
Yeah.
totally, totally. Well, there we have it. Round of applause for Amanda.
Hey.
And we got a lot more coming up. Amanda and I were just chatting, and September is looking chock full of insights. So definitely check out our upcoming webinars. You can find them all here on our webinar page, and we will catch you another time.
Yeah. See ya. Thanks, everybody.
See ya.